everyone. First off, I want to apologize. I know it's been a really long time since I've gotten a video up. And the reason for that is because I can no longer call this a pregnancy vlog. I gave birth to my baby boy, and it happened just a little bit after 40 weeks, so I was planning on doing my 40-week update, and then I went into labor. So here I'm just going to kind of go through my labor story, and I'm going to get back into posting some regular videos from here on out about my experience of being a mom. So for my pregnancy story, I did go into labor on my own at 40 weeks and 3 days. So at my 40-week appointment, I was actually up to 3 centimeters dilated at that point, so that was an additional centimeter than I had been, which was great news, but you can still be 3 centimeters dilated for a while before you actually go into labor, so it was good that I was making progress, but didn't actually mean it that much compared to when I was going in. But my OB didn't think I would make it to the next appointment I had scheduled, which was for a week later. And if I had gone that far, we would have started talking about inducing. She did strip my membranes again at that appointment, but like I said, that happened the week before too, and it didn't really lead to anything. So I was just kind of hoping at that point. And I had been feeling some contractions that week, off and on, but nothing huge, nothing timeable. And other than that, there was kind of more of the same symptoms-wise. But then on Friday, May 17th, Friday, May 16th, I started having timeable contractions. So when it first started, it felt to me more like cramps. And I've been having cramps for the past several weeks. So what I was thinking of as a contraction was kind of more in the upper region of my abdomen. And cramps just felt like, your average cramps you get when you have your period. But I started having these cramps regularly. It would happen for a minute and then it would go away. So I actually started timing them, and then I noticed that they were running between 7 to 8 minutes apart. Around 2:30 was when I started timing them, and they were fairly regular. And I was actually at work when this happened, and at this point at my job they actually put me on just making diets, so I was on a later duty and helping out with a few extra things. So I was in the kitchen at work all day making animal diets, and that's when it started timing this. And I was on what we call our late shift, which means I was working 11 to 8 at night, and they did have a backup on call for me just in case, because when you're on the late shift, there's actually only 2 of us closing the whole zoo. So they did have a backup on call, but I didn't really want to call unless absolutely necessary. So when I went up for my lunch at around 3, I said to her and to my boss, hey, just so you know, I might be having contractions. And I talked to one of my coworkers earlier on and said, told her what was going on. And she's like, sounds like contractions to me. And again, the only reason I wasn't sure was because to me they just felt like cramps. They were just cramps that happened regularly. And they weren't unbearable. I could work through them. I could talk through them. They weren't comfortable, but they weren't bad enough that I couldn't do other things. I also didn't really feel tightening like I expected to. So it was just a little different than what I was anticipating. But when I did call, I called on my lunch break, my doctor, and they said to wait and see if they get any closer together consistently, under 5 minutes apart, or bad enough that I couldn't work through them. So I just kept going with my normal work day and working through this until about 6 o'clock at night. I noticed they were now at the point where they were about 4.5 minutes apart fairly regularly. So since they were under 5 minutes, I called up my backup and I asked if she wanted to come in for a couple hours so I could just go home and keep an eye on it But again, they still weren't unbearable and I could still work through them. So I told her I'd stay at work until she got in, which I did. So I was in the process of closing up the zoo throughout this. So I'm putting animals away, I'm feeding animals. My coworker actually jokingly berated me when she got there because she saw me hopping a fence, which is a short wooden fence, but I still have to jump over it. That's the easiest way to get in to feed the swans we have in our collection. So that's what I was doing, and she was like, just go home. So I just went home to keep a better, closer eye on it. At this point, I hadn't called my husband or anything, but he'd been texting me to check up, so I told him that I might be having contractions, and then told him that I was going home to monitor it when he checked up on me again. But I didn't want to worry him. At this point, I was starting to think, yeah, this might really be it, but it hasn't gotten to the point where it was like, for sure, we need to rush into the hospital or anything like that. So I came home, and I just hung out with my mom and kept timing them. And they did start to get a little stronger. But as I said, they had been about 4.5 minutes apart. By the time I actually got home, they had dropped back down to 7, 8. So we kept going through this all night, basically. I actually came downstairs and slept on the couch. Well, slept. I didn't really sleep at all because they were getting more intense. Again, it wasn't to the point where it was taking my breath away and I couldn't function. But they were definitely getting more intense and harder to just sit back and relax through, and I wasn't sleeping through them. So they were coming 7 to 8 minutes apart. Sometimes it would be longer, and sometimes it would be shorter, until about 3 a.m. when they had been consistently 5 minutes apart for about an hour. And that's when I called the hospital again, and they said, well, we really want it to be 2 hours apart. Or 2 hours of 5 minutes or less apart before you come in. So, of course, after I talked to them, they dropped back down to about 7 or 8 minutes apart. So I barely slept that night. I got maybe a 45-minute stretch, maybe. And about 7 in the morning, they started getting back to 5 minutes apart. And at this point, my husband had gotten up. We went for a walk up and down our alley, just trying to get things going, and I called again, and they said, okay, you can come in. So from 7 to 9 was when they were about 5 minutes apart, and when we went in a little after 9 a.m. to the hospital to labor and delivery and checked in, and we went up to triage, and when they got me all hooked up to the monitor, my contractions had dropped back down to about 7 minutes apart again. So she said I was dilated to a 4, so clearly I'd shown a little bit of progress. I may have been dilated to, now I'm mixing it up, but in any case, I was more dilated, but it wasn't significant enough where they were going to admit me, so she wanted me to go walk around the hallway. So me and Josh walked around the hallway for an hour, and at this point, they were pretty strong, and I was stopping or clenching Josh's arm during our walking of the halls. They were definitely getting more intense, but they weren't really getting closer together. So we went back in. I hadn't really made much progress, so she said they could A, either send me home, B, have me walk the halls for a while longer, which I did not want to do, because I was exhausted. Actually, before she gave me these options, I actually bounced on the ball for a while longer just to try to keep things going, and I didn't want to walk anymore because I was tired. But it got to the point she said, okay, we can also break your water for you, since I hadn't broken on my own and I've been having contractions since the day before. And that was the most natural method that we could have gone in for getting things going. So I agreed to that, so we got me checked in, and all set up in labor and delivery, and they broke my waters. And at this point it was, I don't know, maybe noon. I'm not very good at keeping track of times throughout this whole ordeal, but it had been a while since we'd been in the hospital. So we just kind of hung out at labor and delivery. The rooms there, by the way, are awesome. They're beautiful. I had a really wonderful nurse who helped me work through contractions. I really went into this wanting an all-natural labor if I could do it, but I also went in knowing that things don't always go according to plan, which would end up being the case with my labor. So I went in wanting all natural, but with an open mindset that if I decided that I needed some drugs, that I wasn't going to beat myself up about it. I did basically labor all that day. My nurse's name was Elaine. She was fabulous. She was really good at helping me through the contractions. I went from laboring on the bed. I was walking around a little bit with Josh. I bounced on the ball, and I went in the whirlpool tub. The whirlpool tub was wonderful. It actually did ease the pain a lot, but I also got really hot in there, so I got out when I started getting too hot or dizzy. And I really liked the birthing ball. The birthing ball was very comfortable for me. It helped ease the pain a bit. I found that to be a really good tool. But I was also so tired, it was hard for me to sit there and do that for long periods of time. So I continued laboring all that day, and I did get to the point where I decided to go ahead and get some fentanyl, because I was so exhausted and the contractions were just at that point really intense. So I went ahead and got that, and it gave me a little bit of relief. I wouldn't say it definitely didn't take the pain away, but it gave me a little bit, just a little bit of relief, so I could kind of rest and lay down and relax a little bit more than I had been. Because at this point I had been going on no sleep, so I've been awake far more than 24 hours. And I was pretty exhausted. As the night progressed, I went through a changeover of nursing staff, and it finally got to the point where I was not making any progress. I had gone from a 4 to a 6 since I had been admitted in labor and delivery, and it was just, the contractions were getting so intense for me, and they were feeling a lot stronger, but I wasn't making much progress in dilation. So I finally decided that I was going to get an epidural because I was so exhausted and I wasn't making progress. I still had a long way to go before I was going to be ready to have this baby. So I knew I couldn't go through a whole nother night of not only no sleep, but contractions as intense as I currently were. They were nothing compared to the ones I'd had on Friday night. So I did get the epidural, and that was the only point I will give him major props that Josh stepped out of the room. He does not like blood or anything, hospital procedures, stuff like that, all freak him out. So he stayed with me for everything, but he did step out when I got the epidural. But my mother was there also, and at this point she'd kind of been in the background throughout everything, which was, I think, perfect for me. I had Josh there to hold my hand, and my mom was there, and it was just nice knowing that she was there, but she wasn't right up front and in with everything. So that kind of worked out really well for me. I was really comfortable with it and really happy she was able to be there. She did come over and hold my hand while I got the epidural, which was not pleasant, but wasn't as horrible as I was afraid it was going to be, because I'd heard really bad things about getting the needle in for it. It definitely hurt, but it wasn't as horrible as I was expecting. I think I psyched myself out more for it. And I did have a good experience with the epidural. It let me finally get some sleep that night. And that was great. I needed it. And my epidural, it didn't numb everything. Actually, it worked better on my left side than my right. I was able to feel some stuff on my right side throughout the whole night. And in the beginning, it was actually weird because in the beginning I could still move around a little bit, and but then as it progressed, I got to the point where I couldn't move without help. My whole left side was numb, my right side was still pretty numb, and I could only really kind of move my foot a little bit. But it did start wearing off towards the morning. Throughout the night, I made really slow progress. So I'm glad I did the epidural, and I'm also glad because they did decide to administer Pitocin, which is one of the things I was really nervous about. I had heard that Pitocin makes contractions a lot stronger, so it's really a lot more intense, painful birthing experience when you have to be induced with Pitocin. Not that I'm saying that if you have to be induced it's going to be a horrible experience, but just contractions are a lot more forceful on it. So I got administered Pitocin after I received the epidural, which I'm happy about. And I went in knowing if I had to be induced with Pitocin to have my baby, I knew I might not be able to hold out for an epi. So I'm glad that I had the epi before I got the Pitocin. But even with Pitocin, my progress was very up and down through the night. I was making really slow progress on dilation. Finally, Sunday morning, I made it to a 10. Which, it's just throughout the whole night, I wasn't really getting very far. Also, I got to the point where I had 2 decelerations on the baby's heartbeat. Now, when they do an epidural, part of the reason I really didn't want it is because you're restricted a lot more, because clearly you can't get up and walk around because you're numb, but also they monitor the baby a lot closer, so you're hooked up to a monitor. I had 2 different instances where they tried to shift me to a different position because they move you from one side to the other so you're not laying on one side too long, where the baby's heart rate actually decelerated and got really, really low. And this was pretty scary. The first time was only a couple minutes, and it was like a whole buzz of nurses was suddenly there around me. The second time was much later in the night, towards the morning, close to when I was fully dilated, but he actually dropped for quite a long period of time. It was several minutes. The OB came in. I had a whole slew of nurses all fluttering around me. I got put on oxygen. It was pretty scary. But luckily it did come back up on its own. So, well, with whatever they were doing. But it did come back up. It stayed up, so it wasn't an immediate cause for emergency. But it was pretty scary when it happened. So I actually went from my first nurse to changeover of the night nurse to a changeover again to the morning nurse. And this was actually the same nurse I'd had when I first entered, which was awesome. My evening nurse was also really great. She was very nice, did a great job with helping me, but the first nurse that I had, she'd just been overall very comforting, really helped me get through those contractions, and she came back on staff again, so that was wonderful because I had her for the rest of my labor, and she was just so amazing. I think that made a huge difference. I actually barely even saw the OB. She came in several times to check on me, but she wasn't going to be staying there until it was go time. So I saw her those few times, but it was the nurse that was with me throughout. So they let me labor down, was what they call it, for a while before pushing, which is just giving the baby some time to move down, I believe. And so we did that for a little while. After the changeover, I had just been to a 10 when the new nurse changeover came on. And finally, I think it was probably around somewhere between 7 and 8 o'clock, they decided to go ahead and let me try to start pushing. Now, at this point, there were 2 things. One, I had started having, my epidural had started to wear off, so I could feel a lot on my right side and a little on my left side. I had started having really intense pain in my back, which got progressively worse, which I think was probably related to baby's positioning, but it was really, really uncomfortable. I was telling myself it was better than the pain of the contractions, but it was definitely hard to deal with, and it was constant, and it didn't let up or anything. It was just getting progressively worse and constant pain in my back. I also, at some point, developed a fever overnight. So it was a low-grade fever, but I was uncontrollably shivering. So that was no fun to deal with either. And in general, I just felt pretty crappy all around. I was exhausted. It didn't feel good. I was shivering, and I had this horrible back pain. So then we tried pushing, and I had basically the nurse on one side holding one leg and Josh on the other side holding another leg. And we worked on pushing for about an hour. But I was not making any progress on having him come down. So at this point, I've been in labor for well over 18 hours. And it might have been closer to 20. And I feel like 18 hours is kind of a marker for them. Or at least I remember my nurse mentioning something about it. And the fact that I had a fever was also concerning, because that can be a sign of infection. So they had the OB come in and check on me, and the baby really hadn't made any progress. And what they thought was that the baby's head was tilted, and he was kind of stuck in my pubic bone. So basically, the nurse had already brought up the idea of a C-section because of all of these factors to me, and said this might be something we have to consider. And it was the last thing I wanted, but obviously what I cared about most was getting him here healthy. So when the OB came in, she checked me again, and she said to me, honestly, I am all for a vaginal birth. She said, I think it is much better in so many ways, and I almost always want to try for it. But in your case, I think you could push for another 3 hours, and that baby's not going to move. She said, I think we need to go ahead and progress to a C-section. So obviously it was still my choice. I could have decided to labor longer, try pushing some more, but with everything that had happened, the fact that I had a fever, and the fact that I had made such slow progress and he wasn't really moving, I agreed to go ahead and do the C-section. So from then on, we just kind of waited a little bit longer till things were all sorted. They had Josh go to get ready. Unfortunately, only one person could go in the room with me, so my mother had to wait in the waiting area. But Josh went to get rooted up. They wheeled me in, and since I already had the epidural in, they were administered anesthesia through that. And I had been really concerned about Josh passing out or just not being able to handle everything with the C-section. And I told my nurses that he was concerned about it. And they were so nice, and they set up a chair for him and had everything curtained off so he couldn't really see anything. But they actually administered the anesthesia, and then they test my pain to make sure I can't feel anything first, so that worked. And I have to say, my anesthesiologist was so nice. I was so nervous about everything. I didn't cry at all throughout the contractions, but I cried a little bit when we decided on having a C-section, and then I cried when we were getting ready for the C-section when I was in the surgery room while he was explaining everything to me. And I was like, he's like, is everything okay? I'm like, I'm just nervous. And he said, don't worry, we do this all the time. And which I knew they do. Mentally, I knew that they do this every single day, pretty much. But, it was a very nerve-wracking thing for me. It's major surgery. It's not how I wanted everything to go. I was scared for me. I was scared for the baby. But he was really nice about calming me down. So they got me all set up. And basically there was a big curtain in front of me so I couldn't see what's going on. And one thing I really didn't like is I had to keep my arms out to the side. And they had a nurse by my head who was telling me what they were doing, not details particular, but how things were going and keeping up to date, which I really liked to have that. And she was really nice too. And so Josh comes in all in his surgical garb, and he sits down in the little chair they had for him, and he says to me as he takes my hand, he says, hello, my name is Josh, and I will be pretending to be your doctor today. Which seems like a very stupid, silly thing, but it made me smile and giggle, and it made the nurses laugh, and it was nice just to ease the tension. Now, unfortunately, partway through my C-section, I actually started feeling quite a bit of pain. So they did actually have the anesthesiologist come back and administer more medication, which relieved most of that, but I still, throughout the rest of it, had just a little area. I don't know precisely what it was they were doing in particular, but a little area along my left-hand side of my abdomen where I could continuously feel pain. But it wasn't unbearable at that point with all the anesthesia I've been given. So, I did have a little of pain and uncomfortableness. Now, even when you have the C-section, it's still going to be uncomfortable no matter what, because you're going to feel the pressure. Just because you don't feel the pain doesn't mean you can avoid feeling the pressure and the moving things around that they do in there. So I unfortunately had pain to go with that, and it continued to be particularly painful in that one spot. But like I said, it wasn't unbearable. And most of what they did took the most of the pain that I've been feeling part way through. They fixed that. But that was kind of awkward to be going through the pain of that as we went through in the middle on getting more medication. But it overall wasn't that long. It really wasn't a bad procedure. And we had Tobias arrive at 9:58 a.m. and he was 8 pounds and 6 ounces and 20 and a half inches long. So it was great to be able to hear him and see him for the first time. There's no describing that feeling. I do remember when they came out, they're like, oh, he's out. And I was like, where's his cry? He's not crying yet. Which, of course, he did shortly thereafter. And Josh got to go over and go see him right away. And he did cut the cord. He did fabulous. So they were working on putting me all back together. And we have a video here of him when he first arrived. So I'll let you guys watch that little clip. We cut the gas.
Congratulations, Mommy and Daddy.
He's here. You see? These little hands? How you doing? He's here. Yeah.
I'll go to the other side here.
Nice size baby. Cut below my fingers and above the yellow plant right now. But you're not hurting.
This is our cereal.
So because there's a concern of infection involved,
Do you have a room?
we're going to get a
Do you have a room?
put them on some monitors, get some other blood studies, and start some antibiotics. Okay. We'll watch blood studies over the first 2 days. Depending on how the blood studies look and how he looks, will determine whether or not he needs 7 days of antibiotics or
Sorry.
just the 2.
I
Okay.
don't know, we might have to start over because I'm messing around here. Are there swabs in here?
There may be some in that. We can grab them when we take it out. We'll be fine.
Oh, you'll culture it
Yeah,
at
we
the
can
end?
culture it.
Okay.
$3,800. 8 pounds, 6 ounces.
You want a picture of him up by the weight?
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Yes.
We're not done yet. The transition's too hard.
Ruby is the other one.
You can't talk. Happy birthday. Like how you love the kids.
Yes.
Wanna hold him for a minute?
Yeah.
Okay. See if we could just get
Come over and show Mama. She's been working hard here.
I'll hold this. Still recording? There you go. Hey, happy birthday. Congratulations. All right, you want to go see Mom? Sit down right over here.
find minutes.
5 minutes? Okay. All right. Okay. Oh. There you go. Okay, we're gonna trade.
Man's arrival into the world. I also specifically remember when Josh first brought him over to me. I immediately started crying, and then I snorted because I was taking such big gulps of air, and then immediately laughed because I'd snorted. I wish I could have touched him more, but I got to at least touch his cheek, and then he had to go down to the NICU, and I had to get all put back together. Now, because I'd had a fever, they automatically have the NICU team standing by, and he did actually have a small fever when he was born as well. So he had to go down to NICU, and I had to go into recovery. So I actually had to wait 2 hours in recovery before I could go down to see him. But as I was saying, I had that nurse for the whole end of my pregnancy. She actually was with me through my C-section and then stayed with me in recovery and went down with me to go see him. So that was awesome because she was just so fabulous. It made a huge difference. And to have her there. And Josh actually went down with Tobias, and I told him too that I would be fine. And he went down with him to the NICU and came back up to sit with me for the rest of my recovery shortly after that. And my mom came in to sit with me as well. So after I'd been in recovery for 2 hours, we got wheeled down to the NICU in my bed, and I got to hold my son for the first time. And I don't have a video clip of that, but I do have a photo, so here you guys can see that. And it was our first family photo, and I did get to try to breastfeed a little bit. We did some skin to skin, which I really, really wanted to do skin to skin right after birth, but clearly with the circumstances as they were, it was not possible. But I got to at least hold him, do the skin to skin time then, and I stayed with him for a little while before they had him go back with the NICU staff, and I got wheeled up to my postpartum recovery room. Now, because of all the complications we had, I was actually in the hospital for a couple more days. I stayed there till Thursday, and Tobias had to stay in for a whole week, so he was there till the next Sunday. Now, he had to stay in because he did have that fever, so I wanted to put him on antibiotics at least for 48 hours, but they actually did blood tests, and his white cell count came back high, so that's why he was on for 48 hours, but they redid it, and it still continued to be high, so he had to be put on it for a week. And the poor little guy also had to get a spinal tap done to check his cell count there, just to make sure there was no infection in any other parts of his body. And if that had been high, he would have had to stay in the NICU for 2 to 3 weeks. NICU is neonatal intensive care unit, so he was in a unit full of premature babies and other babies who had issues at birth. So he had his own little room though, and his little bed, and honestly, like, I'm glad we weren't there as long as we were, but there could have been a lot more issues. And the reason we probably had those decelerations that we did on his heart rate during labor was because the cord was around his neck. Now, we didn't have any complications from it, but that could have become an issue if he did come down on his own and I had delivered vaginally. It could have been a lot worse. And his head was in fact tilted to the side, which is why he wasn't moving down on his own. So with all the reasons combined, I'm glad it went the way it did, even though it wasn't what I wanted. I'm glad we did go with the cesarean section because of all the complications we could have had. Luckily, his spinal tap, as I said, it didn't come back. It came back normal. Otherwise, he would have been in the NICU a lot longer. But as it was, he still had to stay there for a week. So it was really hard to not have him right by us in the room with us. I couldn't breastfeed the way I'd wanted to. My milk supply took a while to come in, which is something that I didn't realize happens right afterwards. But I originally didn't want to supplement with formula, but we did end up doing it because I didn't want him to be hungry on top of everything else he had going on. He had to be hooked up to an IV. He had all sorts of monitors on him, so we did supplement with formula as my milk came in, but I was pumping to try to get my milk in, and I was also going down there every 3 hours to be with him and try to feed him. So it was a lot of back and forth. I couldn't go down as much as I wanted the first day. Clearly I was still recovering and they didn't want me up and moving around as much right away, but we did the best we could, and that was kind of what we went through. We got through a week in the hospital, and yeah, it was a crazy experience. NICU staff was wonderful. It was tough, like I said, to constantly be going back and forth, but so worth it. I love spending the time with him. We would go down, spend about an hour or so with him. I would try to nurse, we would just spend some time cuddling, and then we'd go back up and repeat the process again in an hour or two. So it was a lot of work, and I wish I could have just kept him with me the whole time, but I had to receive a lot of antibiotics too, so that was also a factor in the up and down. I would have loved to just stay down there with him, but I could not with all the recovery. So it was what it was. I'm thankful that there were no more serious complications and that we didn't have to stay in there any longer than we did. And he actually got to come home a day early. He was able to come home Saturday because they inched his antibiotics a little bit closer for us. So here's a little clip of him from that first week, introducing our little man, Tobias. John. Hi everyone. So we had quite an arrival and have had a bit of an adventure here with little Tobias, but I wanted to give you guys a chance to see his cute little face. So this is our little man. He's kind of awake right now. We ate just a little bit ago, so now he's just kind of hanging out, being a little bit sleepy and looking around. But how cute is that little face? He's definitely got Daddy's eyes and Mommy's little chin, which you can't see that well right now, but he's got a little butt chin like Mama. He's got my little forehead crinkles. He makes little old man scowls. But I love those pudgy little cheeks. So yeah, he's just kind of hanging out, checking things out right now. But he's pretty darn cute. He should get to come home later on tonight. That's my pregnancy story. That's my birth story. Kind of wraps that all up. I still have a couple videos I want to get up about being pregnant and I'm going to start posting more regularly again. It's just been a crazy couple weeks of getting used to having him home and adjusting to being a new mom. So stay tuned for more videos. I'll have a video coming out shortly of the day he came home, and I'll be introducing some more videos from here on out, so stay tuned to my channel. Thanks for getting through all this, and I know it was a long one, but I appreciate you watching it. Feel free to leave a comment below about your birth story, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. Bye.